Hey, I'm Nicole, your host of the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. On this show, we're going to be talking tangible action that you can take in order to achieve the life you thought was only achievable after retirement. Everything you want now in life, you can have it. Will it take hard work, patience, and uncomfortable growth? You bet it will, but it will be so worth it. On this show, we will be deep diving into the topics of lifestyle design, travel, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. I myself am a global citizen and world traveler who left my home country and conventional lifestyle behind for a life of adventure and following my passions. And that's exactly what I want for you. It's your time to love your work, build your wealth, and create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. Let's do this. So this is our very first co-hosted episode of the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. So I'm here with my brand new co-host. I'm so excited. We are going to be chatting about so many different topics as it pertains to being a traveler, being a digital nomad. But in today's first episode, we are going to introduce ourselves, our stories, how we got to where we are today, how we have become digital nomads, and what that journey has looked like. It definitely looks different for everybody. So Cami, welcome to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. As we've talked about before, I am obsessed with podcasts and just, sharing stories and talking in general. So I'm really excited to be here with you and super excited to talk about digital nomadism and all things that are around it, because as you said, I think that when you become a digital nomad, there are so many things that change in your life and you start to relate to people and to the world and to like the societal structure of things in a different way. And when you have friends that are not really in that way of living, it's just sometimes a bit challenging to, I don't know, make yourself feel understood. So I think it's really nice that we're starting this conversation. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. So let's kick it off. Today we are going to dive into our stories, our journeys. I will share mine, but first we're going to start with Cami. So tell us all about you and how you have created this life for yourself.
Okay, I'm going to focus specifically on the digital nomadism part because I feel like we could talk for hours about our stories. So I remember there's like when I was 20 years old, so this was 8, 9 years ago, when I first had graduated college, I remember that I was really already obsessed with traveling. I wanted to have this lifestyle, but this was like 9 years ago. So the digital nomads that existed, they were those kind of like influencer, traveler type of people, So it was still for a very small slice of people, it was like either you get a lot of followers on Instagram or YouTube or you're not gonna make it as a digital nomad. So I remember that I really wanted to become a digital nomad. I remember that I used to tell my parents about it and everything. I was like, I'm gonna travel and work remotely and blah blah blah, and everyone was like, yeah honey, just like get out of your horse. And I don't know if that's a saying in English, but that's a saying in Portuguese.
I don't think that's get out of your
no.
horse.
Yeah, it's like that is totally a saying. Yeah, okay. So it's like get out of your high heels, kind of like stop dreaming.
Get off of your high horse, maybe. Is that like
yeah,
the
of high, yeah, of your high horse, yeah. So stop dreaming and, just take a 9 to 5 and whatever, be happy with it. And I was like, that's not my dream. I want to go and travel the world and work at the same time. I'm sure that this is possible. And no one believed in me, but I just knew that from whatever I would create in my life, this would be one of the things that I would prioritize. So it was a lot related to freedom in my time, freedom in my space, in regards to moving around and everything. So those things, since I was like 20, they were really important to me. And it was really funny because ever since then, all of the jobs that I had, they were remote. I don't know how, like, then we go into spirituality. Like, I'm sure that I manifested or created that in my reality because it was so ingrained inside of me that I was like, I'm not going back to a freaking corporate job, that I manifested and created and attracted, I don't know, like however you want to say it. I ended up being in multiple jobs that were remote. So since I graduated from college, I always had this freedom of time and of space as
Okay, wait,
well,
I need to
kind
know, what
of.
were the jobs? What jobs have you done in the past? Because all of them to be remote, like that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was like in 20, like 8 years ago, So it's like really, I don't know how that happened. Like, I'm really grateful. So the first job that I had that was, they were remote, but they didn't have an office space, but they were kind of like, I would say that the first one was kind of more like hybrid because I worked for like as an operations leader slash operations manager for a production agency in Brazil. So they did a lot of production and shoots, like fashion shoots and things like that, photo shoots. So sometimes throughout the week I would have to go into the studio, to support them in the photo shoot, or like to meetings physically somewhere. But in general, I remember I used to be like I think I was the only one out of college that would work from my house, the majority of my time. And and I was like really being paid like quite well for having gotten out of college, and so that was the first job that I had. I stayed in it for 8 months, and it was really nice and inspiring, but at the time I was starting to get really into spirituality and personal development and things like that, and that environment was quite toxic, to not say like extremely toxic, but it was a little bit toxic. So eventually there was this other company that was a company that I worked for 2 years that was like focused on spirituality and meditation, and hosted like several events and workshops around Brazil and around the world as well. The girl was starting to she really skyrocketed, the founder, and the company was starting to grow a lot. So she then started looking for team members. And I remember that I had this intuition. So I think this also starts my journey with my own intuition. Like, I had this intuition to tell her that I was really wanting to help her because I had so much time because of my other job that was remote. Because normally that happens, like when you start working remote, you realize that you can do a task that would take you like 8 hours in the office space. It takes you 2 hours because you don't have to pretend that you're working somewhere, you're just like really doing your job. And then the rest of the day you can just use it for yourself. So I remember that I had this like a lot of time for myself. And so I told this girl like, hey, I really like your company. I really like the purpose of your company, and I would like to help you grow. And I'm really good at marketing. That's what I graduated in. So if you need any help, like, honestly, you don't even have to pay me. I'm here for it. And at 3, I remember that like we talked back and forth, and eventually 4 months later, she decided to actually hire me. So I quit my job in this other production agency and started working for her. And I took like half of like a down payment, quote unquote. I don't know, that it's not down payment because that's for a house. Like, I took a cut in my salary basically to start working for her because I believed in her project so much. But yeah, and then I stayed with her for 2 years. It was and she had this big thing with remote work. So she was the founder of the company. She was already someone who didn't believe in office space, and she believed that everyone could work from anywhere in the world. So this was the first job that I had that the founder was instigating us to go travel, so I could travel wherever I wanted and work from wherever, because she herself wasn't even in Brazil that much. So if I wanted to go to somewhere else in Brazil, if I wanted to go travel on a Thursday and then come back, like do a weekend trip, but then go on a Thursday and come back on a Tuesday, that would be normal for me. So yeah, and that was back in 2017, I would say. So 2018, so like 6 years ago. And that became, is it 6 years? I don't know, like whatever. So that became my norm. So I really don't know. And after that, some other things happened. Maybe I should tell about that. But I think that it's really interesting because, like, since back then, I don't really know what it is to have to
Mm.
like leave only for on a Friday and then come back on a
Yeah.
Sunday for a job. You know, I don't know how that feels like, and I would feel so constricted by it.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know
I know how it
why.
feels and it is not fun, trust me. I think now like everyone's trying to run away from that life as much as possible because it can be yeah, very soul-sucking.
Yeah, because you left your corporate job. Was it 4 years ago?
So, well, I actually had a full-time job that I was working 9 to 5 right out of university. And then up until just over like a year and a half ago, maybe closer to 2 years now, up until then, I was in that position the whole time. So that was maybe like
Mm.
6 years of being in positions where I had to be in the office. So definitely different from you. But I think it really made me appreciate, this lifestyle and being able to sleep in a little bit more and then do work that I actually want to do and that I enjoy. But I'll share more about that in my story.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. No, I'm really curious about that because we come from different, a little bit of different backgrounds, but a little bit of the same. But so anyway, so after 2 years in this company, I eventually went to Bali to do my second yoga teacher training. So I'm actually a 400-hour certified yoga teacher. And while I was there, let's just say for the purpose of you meeting me, like someone who's listening to this for the first time, like a lot of things happened throughout that month that rock bottomed me, and I felt like that life or the universe was pulling the rug from underneath me, and I just a lot of like structure and ties that I had with Brazil were like wiped away. And throughout this month, I was like a completely different person from November of 2019 to December of 2019. Like in just 1 month, everything in my life changed. And eventually I was like, you know what? Like, why the heck am I even going to go back to Brazil? Because my idea was go to Asia for 4 months and then come back to Brazil and continue my normal life. However, I had this dream since I was 20 years old to live abroad and go explore the world and everything. And I was putting it aside a lot for several people in my life, like my ex-boyfriend and my family. So I never really allowed myself to really go and explore and everything like that. So when I was there, I was thinking to myself, why am I even going to go back? Like, this makes no sense. So I decided to just stay there, and I think that that was the start of my digital nomad journey. And it was so scary because at that point I had left the company, the spiritual company. So I was really on my own, and I was like, okay, I need to figure out how I'm gonna make money online, how I'm gonna make this work, because I have this savings, that I can use, but it's for limited amount of time. Thank God I was in Asia because my money was worth more there than it would be in Europe. So yeah, so I stayed and lived in Bali for 4 months. I was traveling around Thailand for a bit. Then I had a plane ticket already bought from Singapore to London. So my idea was to come to Europe and then do some workaways or something like that. And while I was doing that, I was also selling yoga classes online and building my website and learning all of like the new things about having like an online business and doing digital courses and things like that. And yeah, it was like a big challenge for me. I remember that I was struggling a lot, especially in regards to money mindset and how I'm gonna make this work, because I don't want to go back to like feeling like I'm trapped in the rat race, but at the same time, this is a new world and I have no idea because I don't have anyone in my life that has made this work, So I'm the first one out of my circle of people that I know physically that is doing this. And because, I had friends that had gotten jobs in other companies and then had moved to Europe, or I had, like people that I knew online that had online business, but people that were really close to me that were being entrepreneurs online, I don't know any, So eventually I was there in London, was working, looking for workaways, was, doing my online classes and showing up online and hustling my way into my, digital stuff. And then eventually everyone knows what happened in March of 2020. COVID hit. So from one day to another, the universe again pulled the rug from underneath me. And then I had to go back to Brazil like instantly. And that paused my digital nomad thing for like 1.5 years until I picked it back up in September of 2021 when I left Brazil with a one-way plane ticket to Portugal. I followed my intuition again. I wasn't making nearly a minimum salary in Portugal, but I just had this knowingness that I had to go. And it was my dream. And it had always been my dream to like follow this, and live as a digital nomad and just travel around the world, following my intuition, following the universe's signs and everything. And I didn't care anymore. I think I reached a point that I didn't care if it went wrong, because it was something that was calling me so much that I just had to see if it would work out, And I remember that my mom, she was like, asking me like, but do you really need to go? Like, do you really need to, like, don't you want more stability, more safety and everything? And I was like, Mom, I have this podcast, because at that point I already had my podcast. I have this podcast in which I talk about intuitive living and intuitive traveling and, following your heart and blah, blah, blah. I can't do that from sitting here in Brazil, like, follow your dreams and don't be afraid, to lean into the surrendering of the unknown, and then being there in my couch in Brazil, like, super afraid. Yeah, exactly, like the most hypocrite podcaster on earth. Like, I can't be this person. I have to lead by, example. Yeah. And so in September of 2021, I bought a one-way plane ticket to Portugal, and I kept saying to my friends, they were like, oh, goodbye, blah, blah, blah. I was like, guys, I don't know if I'm gonna be away for 2 months, 2 weeks, or 2 years. At this point, it has been almost 2 years or 20 years, who knows? But so don't say like goodbye as if you've never seen me again, because I don't know how long this is gonna last. And yeah, for some reason it has been working out ever since, and now I'm more stable, and of course it has its challenges, and of course I'm still really afraid of the unknownness that comes with it, but I wouldn't choose any other lifestyle for sure. So
wow,
yeah,
what a journey.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I think it's so interesting that you always kind of knew that you wanted this lifestyle. And so you just kind of made it happen without, of course, there were, digital nomads like 10 years ago, but it wasn't really advertised. Like, it wasn't a thing that people knew about so much. Ever since, I think, COVID, it's become a lot more prevalent. So it's really interesting to me that you just kind of had a knowing of like what you wanted to do, and you just went out and created it for yourself. I wish I had that. Honestly, when I tell my story, like, it looks very different because I wish I had that intuitiveness, and maybe that does come from you being very intuitive with yourself. I'm definitely less spiritual, I think, in some aspects than you are. So I find that really interesting, and I'm curious as well. So I think we chatted about this maybe last week or something, but your astrocartography, I know I was telling you that I got mine like read recently. So I'm curious, like, did you know about that? Do you follow that? Was Portugal a place where you were like, okay, my line runs through here, like I need to go here, like why Portugal? I don't know. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we talked a little bit about how you decide on what place you want to go, and how yours is very strategic and mine is very emotional and intuitive. So I don't know what this story is really interesting. So I was back in Brazil. I think it was July or August. I don't know. I already had this intuition, like Portugal was coming into my awareness. So it was like, and it's funny because I had visited Portugal before, but I didn't really like Portugal, and I saw it as like meh, like kind of whatever, like I wouldn't live in Portugal. Like that's what I kept telling myself. Like I don't want to go to Portugal. It's just another Brazil. Because there are so many Brazilians there. They speak Portuguese, I was like, I want something that's more different than Portugal. So anyways, but I kept having it in my awareness. So I was like, I have this sensation that I'm gonna, go to Portugal. I don't know why. And I remember that I was meditating in Brazil in this kind of like farm place that we have. And I remember that I asked the universe for a sign. I was like, okay, if I'm meant to go to Portugal this next semester, so like the next half of the year, so it was like between August and December, show me a sign. And the way that I communicate with the universe is by like the sign of a moon, of like half moon. So every time that I see half moons, I know that's the universe talking to me. So I was like, my eyes closed, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, show me a sign. And I knew it would have something to do with the moon, because that's how I communicate with it. And then I remember that it started like this big wind, like it started getting really windy. Like the wind was blowing really, really, really strong. And then above me, there was this like little, this little like trinket that's hanging out off of a ceiling that like makes a sound, like has a bell or something. So we had one of those, and I was outside. So it was starting to like, it was really wind out of nowhere. So I swear to God, this wind came out of nowhere, really, really strong. This thing started to make a huge noise because it was moving a lot because of the wind. I had never looked up. I swear to God, like I had never looked up. And but it was so like strong, and the noise was so strong that I had to look up. I was like, what is this? And then I looked up, and it was actually like a little thing that was coming out of the ceiling, and it had a moon on it.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, like I literally like I asked for the sign and I received it like 10 seconds later. It was crazy. And I got like goosebumps all over my body, and I knew but at the same time, like I knew that I was going to go, but I also had the intuition to know that I had to wait for the right moment. So I knew that I was going, but I knew that a door would open for me. I wouldn't have to force it. So I have this like very strong in my being, this thing of like you not forcing yourself into something. Is like you flowing into it. Like you almost feel like you tripped and you're in it, So eventually I had this one friend that had moved to Portugal, and I hopped on a call with her to talk about like something else. And I told her, yeah, I'm thinking about going to Europe. Like, I don't know where yet, maybe Portugal, but I'm not sure where I'm going to stay and everything. And she was like, why don't you come here and stay with me for 3 weeks, and then you figure out what you're going to go. And then when she said that, I felt it in my body. I was like, this is the flow. Like, this is my door. This is the universe opening this door, and it's my invitation. And this is where it all started. So I went to Porto, stayed with her for 3 weeks, and then after that I kind of like just kept figuring it out, And then I went to Lagos, and then I lived in the Algarve in Portugal for like 4 or 5 months, met my roommate there. Like everything was so magically lined up. Like everything lined up really, really magically. And then eventually went to the UK for some months, kind of like transition period, and then came to Greece, I've been here since almost like 1 year now.
Wow, that is so freaking cool. Like, I think it's so interesting to talk to people like you who are so aligned with like, I don't even know the right word to call it, whether it's like your, like the universe or like just yourself spiritually, or like, I don't know what the heck it is, but I think that's so cool. And like, definitely in future episodes, we're going to get into that so much more, and like how you figure out too, like where you travel next. For me, like you said, yeah, it's very strategic of like, okay, what makes sense for the next destination. But I think, it's really interesting to hear that and to have you on, because yeah, I feel like we can learn so much from each other.
Yeah, so much, exactly. Because also I'm really curious about your story, and also how you ended up how you structure your journey also, because you're moving around way more than I am. So
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So that's a great segue. I will share some more about my story. And yeah, if you have any questions, like let me know. So I was, it's so interesting because as a digital nomad, like I don't know and myself, like I consider myself a global citizen. And so for me to say like I'm from Canada, it used to align with me, but I feel like a lot of digital nomads now, especially and global citizens, it's like I'm from somewhere. Well, I have like three different countries that are really like home to me, and Canada is the last one. So for me to say
Oh,
like I'm
really?
from Canada, like Canada is my home, like it just doesn't make sense, but I don't really know a better word. So I'll just say here like I was born in Canada, like I guess technically I'm from Canada. I lived there till I was like 22 years old for the most part. So I guess for this purpose we'll just say that. But I don't know, that's my little rant about like I don't really know the
But
right verbiage.
what are the three countries that
I'll
you?
go into that. Yeah, I will definitely go
Okay.
into that. So I was born in Canada and go throughout high school, university. I think for many of us, especially many women, the dream for me was always might look a little bit different for you, but a lot of people I hop on calls with, they are like, yep, totally understand that the dream for me and for a lot of us was to work a corporate office job, to, kind of wear like the pantsuit into work. For me, that was always the only thing that I thought I wanted. And so I finished university pretty young because I'm like an October baby. So I think I was like 21. And then I went straight into a corporate career. It was pretty chill. I will say I was an executive assistant, which is something that like my type A skills are very good at. So he was a high level dental practice owner. He put on an annual conference in different, like in California, in Tennessee, in LA, like different conferences every year. So I would plan and organize those. And I learned a lot about dental, about business. He was really an entrepreneur first, so more than a dental practice owner. So that was kind of very interesting for me now looking back, being an entrepreneur, to see how he operated. I worked for him, and then being in that job for probably less than a year, I was just in the office every single day. And even though it was a very amazing job, I learned so much, but it was just the stifling of being in one place every day and being like 22 years old and thinking, I don't know how the heck I'm going to do this for the rest of my life when I can't even do this for 1 year now. Whether it's this office or an office in Toronto, which was where I always wanted to live. That was like the big city for me. It's like 4 million. It's not that big. But that was always my dream. And so I was like, I don't know how the heck I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. So I started looking at other options of what else I could do because I never truly felt aligned with Canada. And sorry to bring this up again, but when I got because I find it so interesting, the astrocartography, when I got that read, and I don't know what the lines are, there was like a black line, and she was like, this line shows kind of like not alignment. I don't exactly remember what it was. And it was basically going through my hometown. It was like right beside my hometown. And she was like, it's so interesting that you never felt aligned there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Anyways, so I thought that was very interesting. I never felt aligned in Canada, but also in Western culture in general. I just feel like, I've been to London. Of course, I've been to the States. I've never been to Australia, but it's kind of all the same to me. And of course, there's cultural differences, but the actual society, I never really felt aligned in Western culture. And I didn't know this. I was 22 years old. Like, I've realized this as I've lived my life and lived in China and all over the world. But I just knew that I didn't feel aligned and that I didn't want to work that 9 to 5 in an office for the next like 40, 50 years, whatever that may look like. I knew that there was more out there because I knew if I stayed in Canada, what the rest of my life would look like. I knew that I would eventually buy a house, I would get married, I would have a dog, I would have 2.5 kids, and maybe there would be some
2.5.
spontaneity. Yeah. Oh, everyone's always like, where does the point 0.5 come from? It's like, well, statistically, like I don't know, like the census, like you divide up the kids, like 2.5 kids. But you know what I mean? Like, and I
Yeah.
knew there would be no like spontaneity in my life other than maybe like one vacation a year for 2 weeks. And I was like, that doesn't sound good to me. And I always say, like, I do have friends who are back home in Canada who are living that life and who want that life. And I'm like, that's freaking awesome. Like, if you want that and if that is your goal and you love that life, like, do it. But for me, what I like to call lifestyle design, that was not how I wanted my life to be designed to look like. So I ended up looking into how the heck I could just get out of Canada and then from there figure something else out. So for me, I was like, you know what? I'm going to teach English in Korea. Everyone was like in Korea, teaching in Korea. And so I started talking to this really amazing recruiter who was also Canadian. And he was like, yeah, Korea's great, but everyone's going to China. And I was like, I don't want to go to China. Like, that is just, I feel like, especially this was in 2017. So this was like 6 years ago. There was a lot of, I guess, ideologies that people thought about China. Like for me, I was like, oh, the sweatshops, and there aren't huge buildings or big cities. It's just kind of like everything is very rural, like very uneducated. But I was just like, I don't want to live there. I want to go to Korea. And I ended up going to China. I ended up moving to Shenzhen, China, long story short, in August of 2017. And I was just like, worst case scenario is I just go back to Canada. Like and I really wanted to make it work because I knew I didn't really want to be in Canada, but I was like, if I hate it and nothing goes as planned, I just go back to Canada. I start from square one again, and then I can leave again and go somewhere else. But I'm going to try this. And I wanted to build a new life for myself. So went to China. I was 23 years old, I believe, at the time, and I ended up loving it. I met a great community of people, of other, expats. I also have some really great Chinese friends who I still keep in touch with. And my plan at the time was go to China for 1 year, and then I would go to like somewhere else in Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, work, volunteer, whatever it looked like, and just figure out what I wanted. But I ended up really liking China, great community of people, loved the city. It was 12 million, or it is 12 million now. And I was like, this is perfect for me. Like, I love big cities. I love a lot of people. I'm from a small town of like 1,000 people. It's a farming village. And for me, that was never my vibe. So big city, loved it. Ended up staying for 4 years. And basically I loved everything except for the actual job, which was teaching. And I don't even like kids that much, to be completely honest.
my
I
God.
don't even like think I want kids. That's like a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
But, and so I stayed in that role because it was manageable. It wasn't a super strenuous position, but it was by no means my dream job. But I got very, I think, unaligned at one point right before COVID hit in China, because I started seeing my friends who were making more money, were moving up the corporate education ladder, and, whether it's counseling or teaching, and kind of moving up that ladder in China. So I started studying for a test that would continue me on a teaching journey, but I would just be getting, a better certification, better degree, higher pay. I was going to move to Shanghai was kind of the plan. And then COVID hit. So it was like November 2019 in China. I remember being I worked with a bunch of my friends. It was really amazing. We were in the staff room, and I remember my one friend saying to all of us, oh, I hear there's like a virus up in Wuhan, which is in like the north of China. And we were in the south. So he was like, yeah, there's a virus up there. And somebody died, like one man died. And we were just like, okay, like whatever. Didn't think much of it. It was kind of far away from us. And then in January, it was Chinese New Year. So Chinese New Year, we would all leave China, travel Asia. We had like a month off. So we had lots of time. It was a really great time. And so we were all outside of the country when it got really bad in China in like December, January time. And then it got so bad, like seeing pictures. And this was the first country that it was really happening in. So like we didn't know what the heck was happening or what this was going to turn into. We just were seeing pictures on WeChat and like all of these groups of grocery stores with no food and like people just so stressed out. And I was like, I don't want to go back to China. So I flew back to Canada in like January or February, and was expecting to be there for like a month or two. I'd go back to China. Didn't happen. Got stuck in Canada, which was like
stuff. So all of your stuff, like you left, like you had an apartment there and everything, and all of your stuff was still in China.
So my whole life was in China. I moved, like when I moved, I had everything with me. So I had an apartment, I had a job, I had a cat. Everyone's always like, what happened to the cat?
Cat,
I
yeah.
had a cat. I had a partner, which actually ended up like breaking us up, just because of the distance and like other issues. But basically, my whole freaking life was falling apart. Like I was like, I don't know what to do. Like I have to keep paying rent on this apartment. I was thankfully still getting paid, but I wasn't working. And then I'm going through this breakup while I'm living with my family in Canada, which is like the last place I want to be. And then my cat, like somebody else had to watch my cat because I was like, I don't know how long it's going to be till I get back to China. So everything was a freaking mess. And I had all of my stuff in China, like everything I owned. I had one carry-on suitcase. I didn't even have my laptop with me. Not that I worked online at that point, but thankfully somebody I knew was flying from China to Canada like a month later. So I was like, please go to my apartment. Like I had to, really finesse getting the keys to her. And it was this whole ordeal. So thankfully she brought my laptop back to Canada for me. And I literally didn't have anything. I had to like just wear my family's clothes. And because I had like Thailand clothes because I was in Thailand, and then it's winter in Canada. Clothes. It's like February, so Thailand clothes don't work.
No.
But yeah, so it was like a very stressful time. Like looking back and talking about it now, it's like making me think more about it. I usually just am like, yeah, it was stressful, but it was an interesting time, and I didn't know if I would ever go back to China. I didn't know if like what was going to happen, if this was going to end. China is also a very strict country, and I knew that they would be, and they basically were one of the last countries to like open their border. I think a few months ago, like in 6 months ago, I had friends that were still in lockdown in Shanghai. Like the whole world was open, and they were still on like 2-month can't leave your house like once a week to get groceries. Like it's strict. So I was like, I don't know like when or if China's ever going to open the borders. It took them 3 years to open the borders, just because they are so strict and they had the no COVID policy for so long. But anyways, so I realized during that time when I was stuck in Canada, I realized that what I was doing with my life was not at all what I actually wanted to do. And I realized I was basically just doing the same thing I was doing in Canada. I was going into an office job, working for somebody else. I was just doing it in China where, yes, I liked my life more, but I still wasn't truly happy doing what I was doing every single day. So, and I think a lot of people made that realization during COVID because you're basically forced to sit there and do nothing all day. And, I'm very grateful for that time looking back on it, but it was definitely difficult. I was in Canada for like 9 or 10 months before there was a small window for me to go back to China. But yeah, so I realized, like, what do I actually want to do? I had always loved working online. I'm definitely extroverted, but I'm introverted very much so, I would say, as well. Especially as I get older, I'm like, don't talk to me. And so I was like, I just want to work. I just want to work on my computer. And I loved learning about different softwares and systems and how you can implement them. And I'm very organized. So how you can like organize your life. I didn't have a business at this point, but I was just like organize everything in my life online. And so I realized, like I can turn this into something. So it started out with coaching. I think everybody was like talking about coaching back then. So it started out with coaching, and then that was like 3 years ago. It's transitioned a while back into my digital marketing agency. So that is what I run along with my Nomads brand. And I freaking love it. Like it's so much fun, but I didn't have that much clarity at the time on what I wanted to do. So it was definitely, and that's what I always say to people is when you're starting something, like what it starts out as, even within the first 6 months or a year, which seems like a long time, it's probably not going to be that 5 years down the road because you're still figuring out what you really want to do and what's aligned with you and who you're targeting, what your messaging is, like who you actually even want to work with. What those clients look like. So, I always say like be very flexible with it because it definitely did change a few times for me, but I love what I do now. I definitely would not change it. And yeah, it kind of started from there. I ended up in October of 2020 going back to China. That flight was so scary. I was like, I'm going to get COVID. I had to pay for my own quarantine hotel, which is a very nice hotel in China, but I did have to like pay out of pocket for it. And I hadn't been working for 10 months and then food. And they did like a blood test. Like it was a very intense quarantine. And that was the only quarantine I did, thankfully. But then after that, got back into China, and China, there was no COVID. So it was crazy because the rest of the world was going through COVID. And I go back and it was Halloween, like the day I landed was Halloween. And then we're all in our Halloween costumes, we're drinking, we're at the
Oh
bar, we're all
wow.
partying, and the rest of the world is still in lockdown. It's like
Yeah.
2020. And I was just
Yeah.
like, this is crazy. No masks, like nothing in China because they were so strict. They eliminated COVID, obviously, like to open the borders, they had to change that. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it was very different world in China at the time. And then, but I went back knowing that I was not going to stay in China, like knowing
So
I was
you
just
went
going to
back
finish up my
to,
time there.
yeah, to get your stuff and basically, like you went back to get your stuff
Well, I
or
went back. So you had to get a visa, like you still do. It's very, you can't just like go to China, especially during that time. So I had to go back. I had to get a visa from my company. I had to work. So I was like, it was October. I was like, I'll work till July. So that if I wanted to go back, that's what I had to do. So I got a visa. I
mm,
went to a work visa. I had to keep teaching, keep working. I did get, my stuff back and I got a new apartment and my cat. Don't worry, my cat was okay. He
yeah.
went with somebody else. But I was like, I know that I'm leaving China, so like I can't have a cat. Um, and yeah, so I went like finishing up my time there. It was great, but I was just over China. Like I had been there for 4 years and I was like, I don't want to stay here. But of course, life never works the way that you plan it to. So as I was planning to leave like July 1st, I was like, I want out of here. I want to travel. I want to run my business online. And then I meet my partner who I met him 4 years previous. I met him basically with the first like 3 months I moved to China in 2017. We met at a party. He got my WeChat, which is like the WhatsApp. Like he got my
Yeah.
WeChat, and then we never spoke again. Never. And then I come back from COVID like 3.5 years later, and we reconnect through like his roommate and I met, and then he invited me to a party, and then we just met again. And I was like, I feel like I know you. And he was like, yeah, we met a while ago. And then from there, and it was so funny because I was like, I don't want a boyfriend. Like, I am leaving China. This is not something I'm interested in. Like, my number one priority is leaving China and traveling. And he was like, you are going to be my girlfriend. And he's Mexican. And I think the culture there of dating is very different. It's like when you like somebody, like, you are the person, whether you like it or not. Like,
Or
it's
not.
very, and I don't know if it's that way in Brazil, but I guess it is in Mexico and it's not like that in Canada. But I was just like, okay, well, I'm leaving China. Like, do you want to come with me? And he had restaurants in China. That was his business. He was a
Mm.
restaurant owner. He had four different, like the same, but four chains of the same restaurant in the city. And he was like, I can't leave China. Like, I have four restaurants. And I was like, well, I am. But we started dating and then we just kind of figured that out later. We ended up moving to Turkey in November 2021. And the
Mm.
plan was to just be there for 1 year. We were just gonna like, he was actually gonna open a restaurant in Turkey. And then a year later, we were gonna go back to China. So that was the plan. And I was like, okay, like if it has to be, I guess 1 year out of China is better than no years.
Mhm.
And then we went to Turkey and there was, I think there still is, but at the time there was definitely like a economic crisis with their currency and the money. And so he was like, I can't open a restaurant here. Like the money is not doing very good. I'll make nothing. And so then we were like, let's just travel. And then since then, I've taught him so much about online business and how to really do something that you're passionate about. And so oh my gosh, he does like amazing things. He works with a Chinese audience and Spanish audience. And yeah, so it's been like a year and a half, just over that now. And we've been traveling the world. And that's my long story, but that is how I got to where I am today. And it's been 6 years in the making. Like it was not an overnight thing.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And but I think that although we for sure have like two very different stories, I feel like the thing that we were kind of driven or fueled by similar stuff, like this thing that you said, like, oh my God, I feel so out of alignment in my country, like in my own hometown. It's where I grew up and where I was born and everything, but I feel super out of alignment here. I can't believe that this is gonna be my, like, when you started saying like, oh, I can't believe this is gonna be how my next 40 years will look like, it gave me like anxiety, like mini anxiety attack right now, because I was like, oh my God, I don't want my life to look like that, because I was like, it makes me like cringe, it makes me like, ugh,
Yeah.
I don't want it. And I think that And I also never felt aligned in Brazil. Like I never felt it was my home. I never felt it. I never connected to the culture that much. I've never connected to like the people or the way that things are done. So I always felt really out of place there. And I remember that I had the opportunity to do like an exchange program while I was in college, and I lived in London and in Paris, and I felt so much more aligned with these places, like than I actually felt in Brazil. So for me, it was always that as well. I think kind of looking for a sense of home in a way somewhere else in the world. And I know like there's this, I think that when you are a digital nomad, you think a lot about this concept of home. And I've done a podcast about that, like what is home and feeling at home when you're traveling alone and things like that. And I know that a lot of people are like, home is where you are, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, okay, no, it's like really cute to say that, but you actually feel that with yourself when you are in a place that you don't know anyone. Like I always tell this to people, like when you're a digital nomad and you move from Brazil to China or to wherever, like I can go there and I can say that my name is Nikki, that I am a chef, and that I worked in Michelin restaurant, and that my family is from Madagascar, and no one will know if that's true or not. Like I can just create anything about myself, and I can say that I'm 22 years old instead of 29, like I can create a lot of stories about myself and no one will know what's true or not. So, and for you to be grounded in who you are without your family, your friends, the places that you grew up around, like it's really challenging, to like travel the world and become a new person with everyone and all of the experiences that are new that you meet, and all of the new food that you experiment and the new places that you see, and you're like small parts of yourself, you're like integrating small new parts of yourself every single day. And then for you to still be grounded in who you are and understanding who you are in your identity, like in your core, without you having like the base, the base of who you are every single day, reminding you who you are, it can be really challenging, like to the point of like me waking up sometimes and I'm like, where am I? Like sometimes when I wake up from a really deep dream, I wake up and I think that I am in my room back in Brazil, and then I remember that I'm not, and then I think like, no, I'm in Portugal, no, I'm not in Portugal, I'm in the UK, no, I'm not in UK, like like it seems like my brain is doing like fast forward, actually I'm in Greece, I'm living here now, okay, because it changes so much that you sometimes, like it makes you identity dizzy, like your identity gets dizzy. So I think that is also like a huge challenge. And yeah, I don't know. Anyways, I just went into like this huge rant about it, but I completely understand what it is to like feel out of alignment in your home and kind of like looking for a new home in the world. And like, of course, the world is your home and you yourself is your home as well, but there's a depth to it that you only know when you really experience it. However, I had a question for you because you asked me about my decision to go into Portugal. And I remember that you, in your story, you talked about wanting to go to Korea before going to China. And then eventually you were like, yeah, but then I decided to go to China. But my question is for you is, how did you, like, what happened in that space that you were so attached to Korea that you were like, okay, I'll just go to China?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I really got to like put myself in my shoes years back. But I think everybody was just going to Korea at the time. I think China is now like, or was a few years ago, like the place to go if you want to teach. But Korea was that years back. And so I think for me, like I had never thought about living in China. Like I said, a lot of things come up when you think of China and you don't really know what to expect. And I think Korea has more of a concrete, like, a little bit more, not that because you've never been there, but it's kind of, I don't know, having been to both countries, like they're very different. And I would say Korea is definitely more Western in a sense. And so you kind of understand a little bit more of what your life is going to look like and what it's going to be like. And so I think I just wanted that because China was so the other that I just didn't really know. And I was prepared for Korea. I was like, okay, like this is something that I've planned. I know a lot of people who've been there. Was meeting a friend who had also taught and lived there for like 2 years at the time. So I was like, okay, I'm prepared for this. And then China is just like, oh yeah, you're going to move to Kazakhstan or something, like not that anything's wrong with that country. It's just like, you've never thought of it before. You've never like really heard of the cities. Like you're like, oh, okay.
Yes.
But I'm so glad I made that decision. And I think for me, it really just solidified, like, just go with the flow, whatever happens, happens. And so that's kind of the mindset I like I said, I had to have going into it is, if I don't like it, I can just go back to Canada, because I had no freaking idea what to expect from Shenzhen. I think everyone knows Shanghai and Beijing, and I think people actually now know Shenzhen more because it is a pretty big technology hub. But 6 or 7 years ago, nobody knew what the heck Shenzhen was. 40 years ago, it was a fishing village. It was nothing like it is now. It's a very new city. And so I was just like, I don't know anything about this place. So it was kind of just like a go and see how it goes, spend a bunch of money on a plane ticket and hope it works out. But I'm very glad I did. And it's interesting because I will never forget this. I remember one of my friend's moms saying to me right before I was leaving to China, she was like, oh yeah, I know this person and this person and this person who also went to like Cambodia, Thailand, wherever, to teach English, and they loved it for 1 year, and then they came back and now they're working a corporate office job in downtown Toronto. And I'll never forget that, because I just remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, that is going to be the worst case scenario for me. Like, I will feel like a failure if I go for 1 or 2 years and then come back and just work the corporate, like what I was trying to basically escape. And I was like, that to me will look like failure. Just go for 1 or 2 years, which is what most people do when they're teaching English. Especially, I don't know about other countries around the world, but especially in like Canada and America, you go for 1 year. If you love it, you extend it for another year, and then you come back and then you adult and you buy a house and get a corporate job and get married. And I was like, that is what failure will look like for me. And so I was always kind of chasing anything I could to not end up that way. And thankfully, in my life, I'm so happy the way it's worked out. But I was just like, I do not want it to look like that.
Wow. It's so interesting, because what looks like a failure for one person is like the dream of another. And I'm sure a lot of people look at my life and they're like, oh, what a failure, like in the sense that, oh, she doesn't have a corporate job, she's not climbing the ladder, she doesn't have this name, like this title, on like a company or something like that. And she's doing podcasts, like, what is that, like, I'm sure that there's so many people that look at my life and they're like, or at our lives, and they're like really scared or freaked out about it, because I think it also comes with a certain lack of certainty and stability. Like, where am I going to be living in 2 months? I don't know, maybe here, maybe there, like, who knows, that in another type of lifestyle, to other people that have a certain personality, they don't want this, so I think that it's really important that we have like these conversations and everything, because like a successful life, it looks different for everyone, and I think that is so interesting that you're bringing this up, because exactly what you're saying can be like the dream for someone else, like going out, doing like a 1 or 2 year, and then coming back and climbing that Toronto corporate ladder. And for you, it's like it was the exact not spread of success.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it was so interesting because it's like, just a few years prior, that was what success would have looked like to me. I wanted that corporate office job. I wanted to be in Toronto. And then to have such a change of like, wait, this isn't actually, like, I'm not aligned living in this country, in this city, this isn't what I want. And so I think what I talk about a lot is lifestyle design. And maybe we can like wrap it up with this, but what I like to talk about is lifestyle design. And to me, what that means is really thinking critically about, what do you want the rest of your life to look like? Because if you don't think about that, you're just going to go through the motions and your life is going to pass you by. But you have to actually think, what do you want your tomorrow to look like, your next week, your next year, your next 10 years, the rest of your life? And if you don't have a plan, but then also take action on that plan, you are just going to live the day to day and just go through the motions, and your life, I think, for me, it will pass you by. And that is not what I wanted. So that's why I talk as much as I can about lifestyle design. I definitely have episodes here all about lifestyle design, because for me, that is so important in life, to figure out what you want, but then to actually take the action, which looks like moving to China, which looks like to you being really fucking scared and then having that sign and moving to Portugal and then just starting that journey. And it's like that saying, you have to take the first step. Maybe you don't see the whole staircase, but you just have to take the first step, because I sure as heck did not know when I moved to China that 6 years later, 6.5 years later, I'd be sitting in Paraguay, recording this podcast with you. Like, that is not what I thought would happen. I'm so grateful that happened. But if I didn't take that first step and think what I actually wanted from my life, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah, no, I totally get this. And I really want to say something on that note so we can wrap it up. That it's so beautiful, because what you refer to as like lifestyle design, or life design was the lifestyle design,
Lifestyle
right?
design.
For me is authentically and intuitively living, which is you connecting to the deepest part of yourself and the most authentic part of yourself, to understand, is this in alignment with what I want, my soul wants, or is this in alignment with what my mind thinks that I want, because this is what I was taught by society, this is what I need for external validation, this is what my parents want for me. And I remember that for a while there, like especially while I was in college, I was making so many decisions, and so many of my dreams and the things that I wanted to achieve, they were based off of society and external validation, and things that I wanted to do to make my parents proud of me. But they weren't really in alignment of what my authentic self wanted, with what my soul was craving. So for me, it's about checking in with yourself every single day to understand, is this making my soul happy, or am I just going with whatever my mind perceives as the way that I should be living my life? And I think that is so challenging to do, because we were taught constantly to disconnect from our authentic self and to just put our power outside of ourselves. So I think that this is something that is a really, really big challenge for all of us. And I think that when it comes to becoming a digital nomad, it's also the same. Because you can be a digital nomad as like your mind, and doing like what other digital nomads think that you should doing what other digital nomads think that you should be doing, or doing what you want to authentically do as a digital nomad. So maybe it will look like living in Greece for 1 year, or maybe it will look like living 1 month like per city, like going to one city for 1 month and then going to another city, or for 3 months, or for 6 years, or for, there's not a one way to do it. And I think that for me, it always goes back to you listening to yourself, listening to your body, and connecting to that place that is really truthful, I don't know, to who you are, like really true to who you are, like really your authenticity, And I think they both go really hand in hand. When you put them together, then you're creating an intentional life.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think, that would be a great topic for another episode, is like, there's so many different ways to digital nomad, I guess, as you call it.
Yeah.
I don't even feel super aligned with the word digital nomad. I usually just use nomad. But yeah, there's so many different ways to do it. But yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I like that we kind of have the same gist of it, but different approaches, different words that we call it, different ways to go about it. But I think probably every digital nomad or every nomad has their own term for it, because I think it is something that's so prevalent in this lifestyle. But I think we'll leave it at that. Do you have any last words that you want to say before we sign off?
No, just that I loved doing this. I loved our conversation, loved knowing more about your story, because I knew a little bit, but not that much. So I'm just really excited to have a place in which we can chat about these topics, and also bring this, authenticity and lifestyle design for people to design their lifestyle in their authentic way. I think that could be a beautiful way of saying it. So yeah, I'm just excited for our future conversations.
If this episode has served you in any way, I would love it if you shared what you've learned or a part of the episode that you loved by tagging me on Instagram at Nomad Nicole. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review so that I can continue to bring you educational content, learn, and grow together. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next episode of the Work, Wealth, and Travel Podcast.